Hello everyone, my name is Sahil and I'm a real estate consultant. So I'll be teaching you and explaining you what is the key difference between a studio apartment and a 1 BHK apartment. I'll giving you pros and cons and why and where you should be considering studio and 1 BHK apartment. So starting with studio, what is exactly a studio apartment? It's a single structure where bed, hall, kitchen is there and bathroom is all there in a single area. So there is no separation or no wall in between over there. So generally how it works is like you have a studio, your bedroom, your bed facing your living room, and behind that you see your open kitchen concept. This is how generally majority of our studio apartments are created. Whereas in 1 BHK you get the element of a bedroom separated by a wall, your hall, your dining area and your hall area, and then you have a kitchen which is also separated by a wall. So you get three elements in a way. You have your bathroom in both the elements, that is okay, but in terms of studio you are getting no separation between your living area, your bedroom and your kitchen. Whereas in a 1 BHK apartment, you can have the privacy in your one bedroom, that is a separate entity, and you have your living and hall in a combined, that is another separate entity, and a kitchen separated by a wall, that can be considered as another entity. So the number one difference is the privacy regime. So a 1 BHK can be occupied by anyone, even a bachelor or a family, small family. They can also live in 1 BHK and live a decent quality of life in 1 BHK. Whereas studio is more like the element of privacy is not there. It's just like it is there for you to live. Mostly the tenant you're gonna see is bachelors, which are like bachelors who are not long term. So people who are like short term will see and prefer studio apartment. So this is the one of the main reason of studio in 1 BHK is like the privacy issue and the kind of tenant they attract. The privacy can attract, having some privacy can attract small families and working bachelors. Whereas if you go towards like studio apartment, there is no privacy concept there. So everything is open out there. So you won't see the privacy, and people who want to live there are not, here for a long time. They just want a place to stay. So this will be a main difference. Second point is, nobody desire to live in a studio. It's not an aspiration. If people are given choice between studio and 1 BHK, people generally go for 1 BHK. As a tenant, if you are someone who's renting. So the rental thing will be like you will see there. You can, anyone who wants to live in a studio is someone who is in a particular area for a small period of time. So it's not like anyone who wants to live in an area will prefer studio, because if they're gonna live there for 2 to 3 years, they will at some point in their life will require the privacy, which the studio will never be able to give you. So whenever you go for a tenant, you will be seeing more of fluctuating tenant. So nobody would be living here for a longer period. So that is one of the reason also. So the quality of tenant will also matter whenever you rent it out. So the premiumness will be there. The premiumness of tenant will be lost in studio, whereas in your 1 BHK you can have a steady tenant, also a premium tenant. Right. Third point is, you cannot rent a studio without any furniture, because there is nothing there. So in 1 BHK you can rent it out as a raw flat or with semi-furnished with basic thing like modern kitchen, that's it. But studio needs to be fully furnished with all the things, and then you'll be able to rent it out, because the tenant is different completely. Right. Fourth reason what I say is the resale value of studio apartment depends upon the amount of rent it brings. Same can be said in 1 BHK, but sometimes as the aspiration need also play effect in 1 BHK. Nobody aspires to live in a studio apartment. People can aspire to live in a 1 BHK or to own a 1 BHK, but nobody wants to, own a studio just because they want to live there. People can own a studio just because they can get higher rental, but that will not make sense, right? So when you are selling a studio apartment, the amount of money, the amount of rent a studio derives will determine the selling value. Sometimes you can sometimes you can get 10%, 20% less market value because your studio is not able to attract a lot of, revenue in terms of rental. And number 5 is studio, like living in a studio is not a quality of life, I will say. So to get that quality of life element, you have to look you generally have to tie up with people who owns multiple studio and offer flexibility living option, which is like they tie up with a organization which have their employees coming there for training or anything, and they as a guest house or something like that. Then that is the only way you can get a decent or a premium of a rent in studio. Whereas in 1 BHK, you can have that option, but the worst, you can always have that your family or a bachelor option too, who can aspire to live there for a longer period of time, so you don't get into the hassle. The studio is something you have to go out and look for someone who's willing to acquire multiple and create a, their guest house kind of thing. So these are the fundamental basis, basic difference between the studio and 1 BHK. In terms of aspiration, studio will not be on higher. 1 BHK people will aspire to own a 1 BHK, to live in a 1 BHK, but nobody wants to own or live in a studio. The only reason they need is the rent, and which is higher because it's furnished and presented well, right? Last point also, not a comparison, a single point, that studio mostly works in a mature market. Why? As I covered in the previous point, if the market is mature and people, societies or the apartments are not that much there in terms of anyone to own a guest house or anything, then studio works. Because in mature market, you will have a lot of organization who wants to create a guest house in a studio. But in not so mature market or not so mature area in that market, nobody wants to live in a studio because in that price or less price you can get a 1 BHK. So this also doesn't work in growing market. If you're someone who is in Mumbai and owns a lot of studio apartment, which is close to a office space, so you can have a lot of people who can live there. So the tenant is going, they're coming in and going, but the objective is that the people who are coming here are coming for some specific reason, which can be training in a new office, or they want to learn something, a college student, coaching student, these kind of people you can attract in studio. Whereas 1 BHK can attract a lot of permanent, stable families of that. So this is how it works. Studio doesn't work in smaller cities. It works in extremely mature market. So these were the example. These were some comparison point. I hope this clears a lot for you and makes you helps you in making an informed decision. So thank you for watching. Do share your thoughts in the comment and subscribe if you haven't, and see you next time. Bye bye.